Welcome to the Brain Alpha. Today, we are providing a definitive X-ray of human behavioral change to help you survive the hardest part of any new endeavor. Think about it for a second. If you snap your arm right now, an X-ray shows you exactly what went wrong with zero ambiguity, right? But when you abandon a new diet or quit a side hustle or just fail to learn a new language, there's no X-ray for that. We just tend to blame these abstract concepts like, oh, I guess I just lack willpower. Well, today we're pulling from some absolutely incredible frameworks to map out the exact structural mechanics of human behavioral change.
All right, let's dive right into this explainer. Here is our roadmap for the day. We're going to quickly cover the illusion of success, map out the 6 phases of achievement, figure out how to survive the doom loop, adopt the 1% mindset, avoid the switching tax, and finally, wrap things up by hacking your dopamine.
First up, Section 1, the illusion of success and why those surface-level routines simply aren't enough.
Society absolutely loves to tell us that if we just hustle harder and copy these surface-level routines, we're going to succeed. You see this literally everywhere online. Influencers yelling at you that you absolutely must wake up at 5 a.m., take a highly specific supplement stack, or force yourself through a 2-hour morning meditation. But here's the reality check. The 99% focus all their energy on these surface habits, while the true 1% are out there cultivating a radically different core mindset. They actively doubt common sense, and they actually have the courage to take contrarian action. Look, doing those surface habits, sure, they might optimize your brain a little bit, but they do not inherently lead to success. The true outliers achieve massive results not because of their alarm clocks, but because of their foundational approach to problem solving.
Let's move on to Section 2, the 6 phases of achievement. This is where we map out the actual terrain of human endeavor.
What's really fascinating about this universal sequence is that it completely normalizes the severe friction of the Valley of Despair. It proves that this valley is a highly predictable geographical location on your journey, not some kind of final judgment on your talent. Everyone, and I mean everyone, starts at Phase 1, uninformed optimism. You are incredibly hopeful because, well, you simply lack data. You see the shiny end result, like a massive passive income stream or a perfect fitness transformation, and your brain conveniently just skips right over the friction. But soon enough, you hit informed pessimism, and then you plunge into the brutal Valley of Despair. This is that breaking point where your effort is at its absolute maximum, but your visible reward is an absolute zero.
It's exactly like the fantasy of building a beautiful wooden deck. That fantasy completely shatters the second you realize you have no idea what a floor joist is. New context just crushes our uninformed optimism. You might watch a really fast-paced, upbeat time-lapse of someone building a deck and think, hey, I can knock that out this weekend. But then you hit the hardware store reality check. You don't know how to calculate load-bearing weight or pour concrete footing. The exact same thing happens with wanting to be a content creator. You think it's just pointing your phone camera and talking, but the reality involves complex video editing software, thumbnail design, algorithm analytics, audio engineering, the whole shebang. That sudden, massive spike in cognitive load is exactly what plunges you straight into the valley. Which brings us to Section 3, surviving the doom loop, also known as the trap of restarting. So when you're putting in all that maximum effort and seeing zero visible reward, your brain just panics. We have to take a step back and ask ourselves, are we strategically pivoting away from a fundamentally flawed idea, or are we just fleeing into the doom loop? Because let's be honest, blindly staying on a sinking ship, like, trying to start a business selling fax machines today, that is terrible advice. A strategic pivot means you actually look at the data and adjust your course. But simply fleeing from the pain of the friction, that is an entirely different story. Here is the crucial takeaway. The doom loop keeps you perpetually paying the beginner's tax without ever letting you reap the compound rewards of mastery. You hit the valley, you quit to protect your ego, and then you immediately start a totally new side hustle just to feel that initial rush of uninformed optimism all over again. You are literally using new projects as an emotional escape hatch.
All right, Section 4, the 1% mindset. This is your vehicle for actually crossing that valley.
So how exactly did visionaries like Steve Jobs or Jeff Bezos make choices that seemed completely illogical to the masses at the time? Well, it comes down to this specific 3-step framework. First, you have to doubt common sense. If 99% of people believe something is a given, you need to question it. Second, choose the correct contrarian action. Find value where everyone else just sees risk. Bezos believed people would buy things on the internet back when everyone else thought it was a giant scam to steal your credit card. Jobs believed every single home would have a personal computer when literally no one else saw the need for one. And third, you absolutely must persist despite the ridicule. You have to trust your conviction. So what does this actually look like in practice? Well, maybe it's prioritizing heavy physical weight training for a racket sport where everyone else only practices hitting the ball. Or maybe it's launching your own personal business straight out of school instead of joining that massive corporate recruit suit rush. Or it could be a relentless dedication to audio and reading input to continuously widen your perspective. The 1% actively practice doing what the 99% simply won't do. By constantly feeding your brain with diverse, new inputs, you widen your perspective enough to actually spot these contrarian opportunities, and more importantly, push through when everyone else thinks you've gone crazy.
Moving into Section 5, Avoiding the Switching Tax, the fatal flaw of multitasking.
Look, even the most brilliant contrarian mindset is going to crash and burn if you spread your energy too thin during the hardest part of the journey. This concept of the switching tax perfectly explains why trying to build an audience on 4 different social platforms at once completely dilutes your power. Extreme single-minded focus is mandatory if you want to reach a flow state. Every single time you switch your focus, say from editing a video to writing a newsletter to recording a podcast, you pay a severe cognitive switching tax. You're experiencing the brutal friction of multiple learning curves all at the same time, but you're only generating a tiny fraction of the momentum. True outliers drop multitasking entirely. They consolidate their energy to filter out distractions, which optimizes their brain's processing power so they can actually push past that friction point.
And finally, Section 6, Hacking Your Dopamine. Let's talk about how to chemically fuel this journey.
Because raw willpower is a finite resource, we have to hack our dopamine. Now, this completely flips standard career advice on its head. Don't just follow your passion for the final noun, but rather you need to weaponize the actual verb. We always hear just follow your passion, right? But passion is usually a noun, and nouns are really fragile. If you love the noun of video games, you love consuming that final polished product. But if you get a job in game design, suddenly you're staring at thousands of lines of code for 6 weeks straight. The tedious, grinding reality of the actual process will make you hate the noun. To survive the valley, you absolutely must love the verb.
If your brain naturally craves this specific action, the difficulty actually becomes the reward itself. Think about bodybuilders. To an outside observer, a bodybuilder tearing muscle fibers under hundreds of pounds of weight looks like literal torture. But they have fundamentally rewired their brains to associate that exact physical strain with a massive intrinsic dopamine release. It's the same thing with hardcore gamers who will happily spend 12 hours optimizing what is essentially a digital accounting spreadsheet. You have to audit your own natural inclinations. You cannot willpower your way into getting a dopamine hit from an action that you fundamentally despise.
So I want you to ask yourself this one absolutely crucial question. If you stripped away the promise of money and status, what is the one difficult, complex problem your brain would still naturally try to solve? You need to find that verb. Because when you build your next ambitious goal around an action you inherently crave, the valley of despair simply becomes your playground. Once you realize the geography of this map is totally predictable, the panic just subsides. You start to understand that the friction is a feature of the system, not a bug. It's exactly like an airplane taking off. Maximum fuel and maximum friction are strictly required right before you finally leave the ground.
So take a hard look at your current goals. Are you just relying on a 5 a.m. alarm clock, or are you actually weaponizing the verb? Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this, please subscribe to the channel, give us a thumbs up, and help us build the hype. See you in the next video. Bye-bye.